Good evening. Welcome to the Elite Parent presentation. My name's Daniel Thompson. I work for Which Canoe and I'm the Talent Programme Administration Officer. So we've got people in the room here from HPP. Thank you for coming along. And we've also got people who are accessing via the webinar at the moment. Just to talk to the people that are currently online on the webinar, you should see a mic button. You'll need to mute yourself, so you need to click that, so that should be red there, and you should be able to see my screen as well. There is a chat icon button, so if you click down there onto the chat, you can write a message during the presentation, which all the attendees will be able to see, as well as myself there. So if everyone who's accessing via the live webinar just wants to write a quick message on the chat, just so that I know anyone might be able to hear me. For those people that are accessing via a phone, if you want to make sure that you can mute, have yourself muted as well, so that we don't hear anything and it interrupts on the presentation as well. Okay, that's great. So just to give you a bit of a run through today. I've been working alongside the England Talent Programme to develop a talent parent programme. And one of the things we'll be running is a elite parent presentation. So throughout the year, we've got presentations from past parents of elite athletes and athletes that have gone through our talent programme system to hear about the stories of their child as they've gone through the talent programme. So I'm going to pass you over to Andy and Anne Hounslow today. So Andy and Anne are parents of Richard and James Hounslow, who were both GB slalom paddlers, with Richard winning Olympic silver as well. So they're here today to provide a presentation on everything that they've been through throughout the years working with Andy and Richard. So I'll pass you over to Andy.
Right, good afternoon everybody, here and wherever. When we were first asked to do this, I was approached, but it soon became apparent that it wasn't just me, it was the family. So it was for us, it was Anne, my wife. There was James, who's my oldest son. So Richard normally gets put on the paperwork as the first one, but he's not the oldest. James came along first, and Richard, I've got a daughter Alice. So it's about all of us. So this presentation comes, if you like, from us all. Technology.
There we are.
No, let's go forward. We went back. No.
That's right. That one. See what goes to the next one.
Ah, right. So
technology.
Right. We got involved in canoeing. We got involved in canoeing. Anne was part of Rangers. I was part of the Duke of Redmond's award scheme. Did 2 expeditions on foot. The third one, we said we wanted to do something different. And then we met up in what was called at the time the Welsh Harp Sailing Base over in Hendon, London. That's where we got involved. The rest of us, I suppose, is a little bit of history. We got married. Before that, we entered competitions. So we were slalomists at that time, before we had the children. Not saying how far up the ladder we went. We didn't get very far, but we did enjoy our times and weekends away. And after that, children come along, and we still continued. We still continued in the slaloms. We were involved through the scouting organisation, and we had a Sunday afternoon swimming pool session, of which the children came along to. At that time, it was just the two boys. I think it was in a very early stage that we had them in carry cots at the side of the pool. Then they were able to sort of manoeuvre themselves around. But I think it was my oldest. He just didn't like the water, but eventually they got involved and they started getting involved in canoeing. Up to about eight was when James was my oldest. He started entering a competition. Richard, about 7.5, something like that. So canoeing was part of our life. So for us, it wasn't about only one of us. It was about both of us. So there, that was, if you like,
so that we did get in a boat.
Yeah.
Very old boats.
That's just to prove that we can beat, albeit as you can see from the C2 with the banana boat quite a while ago.
And the paddles are quite unique. We've still got those.
Right. This is really about us. That's what you wanted to know. You're the people there at the moment where we were quite a few years ago. Right. So it's been part of our life for about 45 years. We didn't force our children, two of them, into canoeing. They came naturally. Probably the fact that we were by the water's edge, canoe, slalom, you name it, we were into it. So they were there. So there was a natural draw for our children into it. Yeah, there have been highs and there have been lows as part of that. Probably you've all been through those as well, I'm sure. Unfortunately, what we're going to be telling you here, we can't take you away from the lows because we don't know how those are going to happen for you. But we can tell you our experiences. Doing our children. I hope that you will get to know more so your children. We had to know them as children and as part of canoeing. And knowing them is important for you. Knowing it's no good. The sport is not about you people where you want to achieve in canoeing or where you want your children to achieve. You've got to know them and where they want to go. The children, ours, and yours will also, grow up and mature at different rates. We had situations that quarterly, after a few months, there'll be a paddler who was beating another paddler. Suddenly, the younger paddler or another paddler beats the other paddler. It's all about maturity and their strengths. And we were told at that time, don't worry about things like that. And I'm hoping you will be. Don't get yourself all that my son is being beaten or he never does well. It will happen. It will happen. It's just the maturity of them and the strengths. And we were trying to go back, go rack our brains. There were, I'm not going to mention names, but there was when our children first started, there was a lad at 16. You know, he had facial hair. He was winning everything. But when those of the less mature came along, they started beating him. He then found himself in a very awkward situation that he'd never been in before, because he wasn't winning all these competitions. And in fact, he did drop out. But that's just purely about maturity. Don't force your kids back onto the water if they've had an illness or an injury. We had examples of, apologise if I sort of jump. I'll call them athletes, I'll call them paddlers, I'll call them sort of a couple of things. But if they are injured, we had somebody that was in my oldest son's sort of group. He had an injury, tried to come back too soon, and it was very detrimental. And in fact, it did push him back. In fact, he dropped out in the end because he came back too quickly. So sort of just for you sort of don't try and force your kids back into sort of where you think, they should be. Just be there for them. All right? Be there for them. They know what they've got to do, and really talk to them. What do they want you to do? Don't put your stamp on it. An example for my son Richard was the fact that he just wanted me to be there on the start line. He didn't want a whole spiel about what he had to do. He just wanted me to be there, and it was really the thumbs up, the nod, and that's it. He knew what he had to do. The other thing is positive. Be positive. Don't criticise. All right, you as the term. If you carry a role as a coach, his number one coach, off of competitions, yes, there is an element of criticism that you would have to put on if they're doing a sequence of half a dozen gates and he's not doing it right or she's not doing it right. Yes, you've got a sort of some form of sort of criticism, but on the start line, leading up to that weekend, nothing negative. It's got to be all positive. If your athlete, son, daughter, has a bad run, they will know it. They don't need you to be telling them that. All right? It's all got to be positive. Okay? And you'll find that message will go right the way through, right up to the top level. The psychologists will be telling your athletes exactly that. Nothing negative. Right.
Moving on here.
That's it.
That's the family a long time ago.
That was our boys' main canoeing location, training centre. A canal, Grand Union Canal, what used to be called the fisheries at Harefield. They changed it to the koi carp, but I think everybody who sort of knows it, it's basically the fisheries. But that's where they trained. Just up here is sort of an outlet from sort of there's an inlet above it, and this was all sort of building up here, and that was their training. So sort of they started off at sort of a very low level. Okay. Life outside of canoeing. There's got to be a formal structure to it because your kid's going to school. So you've got to get that set up. So it's sort of get the homework done. It's got to be a school life balance because at the end of the day, if for any reason they choose not to go forward in canoeing, they've got to have that education. It's important. It's important. Really important. Our boys started off with swimming, and that was purely because we were by the riverside, swimming pool side, and it was just literally so important for their safety. That's how we approached it. They went through gymnastics, they went through scouts, they went through football, and swimming. Great, elevated up swimming. Then it was, we want you in the club. Right, sorry, can't go in the club because we were doing canoeing. Gymnastics, yeah, we want you in the club on a Saturday. Sorry, it's canoeing. Scouts, what was Beavers, Cubs, Scouts. We've got Scouts and Troll Leaders. Sorry, it's Scouts. So, but it's important as part of, for us, we felt we wanted to support our children as opposed to letting them loose, on the streets. And for us, that's how we balance that up, the fact that we were supporting them. Yet we had to be organised. Fridays was to work, back, and would have the caravan packed. I would come back from work, boats would go on top of the car, hitch up, and we're away. 2 to 3 times a month we were out, and that was our life. We were trying to work out, we were probably about 4 training sessions a week. That would include a formal one that we would be at the club that the boys were associated with. There'd be 3 other sessions would be down at the fisheries that we showed you there. The boys still see their friends that they had at school. So this is just not about, sort of casting off and sort of going. For example, my oldest son, only a month ago, met up with at least 4 other of his friends and their families. So they still keep that friendship going. And I think that's important. It's not just a life of canoeing.
He's 39. This next week, sorry, not quite 39.
Right. Okay, what have we got in the way?
So, that's Scouts. Richard is right at the front there. And James is to the other side. Oh, there we are, little darlings.
So, it was important there were other things other than canoeing. Again, can I emphasise, that's us. All right, we're not telling you have to do that. This was just us. This is what this presentation is all about. It's about us. The next level. They started to do better than Mum and Dad. We were in sort of, and so once they started taking over, it was about them telling us what to do with canoe. And then we decided that we better sort of hang up the paddles. We were based at a very good canoe club. Hemel Hempstead Canoe Club was close to us. And at that time, they had a very sort of good core of sort of paddlers. It wasn't just slalom. They had marathon, they had sprints, so there was a good cross section. We also had, for us, a good regional setup with now departed Jim Croft. He did probably, Jim being Jim, I know he took Richard away sort of far earlier than he should on the trips abroad into Europe, but sort of it was events that they enjoyed and he was happy to put on. So yeah, we had regular training sessions, whether it be through regional. It started getting sort of then into, for us, the England team. Then it started to get into the sort of the junior GB teams, under 23s, and the seniors. All of which there were trips away for us. So this was our next level. Probably one of the sort of the best one here is getting our independence. They had independence because they learnt to drive, and that was great. But in between that, you had to sit in with them with EL plates on, driving them everywhere, whether it be to training sessions, whether it was with slaloms. So you were in there, sort of, So if you thought on the course side was stressful, yeah, when you're in them, and that was bad enough. So yeah, so that was for us, that next level.
Can I just add something there? At this point, There was no, all the GB, England and everything was basically run by volunteers. There was no sort of setup like we've got now.
So every coach, it was none paid. They would get expenses going away.
I've hit too many. No, I've gone the wrong way. That's interclubs.
That's Cardington. You'll probably recognise that. That was Hemel Hempstead.
That's a trick with Jim.
Yep.
Heading off, that's James. That's James in the junior GBs. That's in Litno. He was 16 then, I think. And Richard is somewhere in there with lots of hair. When he was in the junior GBs. And there's Etienne up there, I've just seen. Okay.
Interaction with other parents. When we first started, we were, I suppose, for us there was a sort of a north-south divide at that lower levels, and then we would sort of coming in. But the parents, every single one of you around here is in that same situation. All right. So you should and need to get on with one another. All right, because you can bounce off of one another and get support from one another. All right. There'll only be the point whereby your children, the only time that they will really sort of get focused in will be on the start line. Other times, the other paddlers, they're best mates. So you need to be in that situation, because we today have still got good friends that we first started off with way back when we first started off, when the boys were in the England setup. Still friends now. In fact, only a week ago, we had friends that came down from our friends that were up in Teesside, came down, and we regularly see them. We're going on holiday with them. We see other friends on a regular basis, and those are the parents that that help out. There's the classic sort of, have you got the Valium or have I got the Valium, when they're just about to go down the course. So it's about sort of that friendship. Equally, we've got friends that have coached the boys. So senior paddlers that have taken them under their wing, where they were in lodgings, and when they were at university, just too noisy. Come on, over to my place. You can stay with me for the week before a race, and they'd stay there. Those people are still friends with us today, and I think it's important. Keep that. You need to be friends, and you also may need one another later on. Some of the things that you do, the boys, if you live fairly close, what we used to do is that we used to meet up. So we were coming from the south. If they were going off to Scotland, if they were going into Wales, we just meet up on the motorway services. They'd all go in sort of one vehicle, and that was it. And so it saved us, as parents, sort of money. And we got a free weekend out of it.
Okay. So that's up in Telly. We used to end up on the green, which I think is where the rafting is now. We used to have the caravans on there. It was the same group that used to meet up every Easter for about 10 days.
I'm guessing the rafting huts are still there, but when we first started off, that was our pitch for 13 years. We went to Tully for 13 years.
We did progress to a
better
cottage. Again, that's in Borg. That's three canoeing families and all there. And again, in Borg. Oh, that's back to Tully.
Tully, again, parents.
Oh, that's more recent. Again, you make lots and lots of friends on when you go out to internationals and things. It's just great to be that camaraderie between everybody. You probably recognise the other faces there.
That's Pau in France. All right. So sort of the mums.
I don't know what George was about to do behind us.
He's probably got the beers.
Oh.
Right.
I had great fun looking through photos and finding all these.
I think Anna mentioned it before. When we started off, the coaches were all volunteers. So sort of they'd still be going away, but they were volunteers. So yeah, they probably got expenses and that, but not as it is now, whereby they've got this lovely building and everybody's downstairs, or whether it be down in Lee Valley, and they're being paid for it. It all started to kick off for us when James was about 18, my oldest. And it's at that point that suddenly he went from sort of supporting himself to sort of this wonderful system whereby there was a little bit of money available. And that was a big eye-opener for him. And we did have to sort of educate him sort of a bit on the sort of the money side of things, not to spend it all at once, because they were still sort of, they hadn't quite got a system working. They had the money, and it was a case of, well, there's the money, and now that's got to make you last for 6 months. Kids, it don't last 6 months, so sort of we had to sort of work on that. What, as part of the GB setup, I would say, you need to know your son or daughter's coach. Do you know them well? You may know it's Fred Blancs or whoever, but you need to know. You need to have that relationship with that coach, so that sort of if you have any issues, you can talk it out openly. It's not about telling him what he's got to do for your child or athletes, but it's about getting that interaction of understanding sort of what you can do to help. Tell him or her, you know, this is not quite going right. What do you think? But effectively, be in a position to be able to talk to them and know them. Know what's available. What can the system? Now I know I'm talking GB here, and probably what you are sort of involved in is at the England level, but it still applies. What can Daniel and the other people downstairs sort of help and provide? Understand what they can offer. Because it's, you know, it may be something that you were unaware of that, oh, that's going to help. Great. Know the rules. Not only the slalom rules, but if you come to a competition, know the rules of that event, that selection event. I was at Lee Valley. Easter.
Selection.
And there were paddlers there, didn't know. Why am I in A and B? It was part of it. It was
There's an A final and a B final.
A final and B final. That's right. And it was a case of I don't know. So you need to be there and to support them. All right, if you're not here and sort of somebody else has taken sort of your sort of children to that competition, but I would hope that whoever took them will know about it. But it's about knowing the rules and of that setup, because you don't want them to lose out by not understanding what that sort of final or B final was about. Did they miss it? If they didn't know that there was an A and a B final, I think in this case it was the young lass it was a big final, so it was a case of she was able to actually get in and at the very last minute prepare herself for a final. But these are all the things you need to understand.
For us, it was a little bit of a learning curve because GB Canoeing was evolving. It was changing all the time. I mean, we went through all sorts of different stages, so it was very much a learning curve for them and us, whereas now it's, well established and a professional.
And there were times that we clashed because they were learning and we were learning as well. So sort of, it wasn't fully smooth sailing all the way through, but that was purely because we were both learning. You guys, what you've got now is sort of this nice smooth setup. We had the rough bit.
Anyway, that's a team being spoken to by John Anderson, who was the performance director. I'm not quite sure what race that was at.
So what this is about it's not just the paddlers, all right? There's this whole backup that goes with it, and that is what I was trying to say about knowing what is out there. Because, okay, I know it's GB, but there will be people within the setup that you've got downstairs, the talents that you can use and get to understand what is available to you.
And that was a very happy performance director in 2012.
He's obviously, for those of you, John's not you.
No,
Director.
John retired about a year ago, I think now, probably.
Yeah, and obviously sort of Paul Ratcliffe's in there now. Right. Goal setting really wasn't something that my boys were involved in. So for this, I think this is something that really is becoming to be evolved. At Richard's level, yes, definitely was. But in the early days, there was no real goal setting in what was there for them, and this was all part of that evolving. When brought in, yeah, it did have teething problems, as I explained earlier, and it's far better organised now. One of the things, I guess, for yourselves that again was do you want to put that the inclusion standard that I hope you all know about. If anybody doesn't know what this matrix is about, good, because I've been really disappointed. It's
Is that slalom related?
This one is showing here.
This one is definitely just slalom.
There is a canoe sprint one for anybody who's a sprint parent as well. But this one is showing is the slalom inclusion criteria for this year.
You okay with that? Yes, no? No? Right. You need to know to give your kids that support. I don't know anything about this. Don't know anything about this at all. Don't need to. I'm at the other end. All right. But all I'm saying is that sort of for us, when we started coming through, and this is as a result of spitting out the other end. So you do need to know about it.
Go back again.
Yeah. That you can get off the internet because that's where we got it off of.
Inclusion in the team.
Yeah, there's so on the talent program tabs, whether you're a sprint or a slalom parent, on the overview, the main page, on the side tab at the down, there is the inclusion policy or qualification criteria. Forget which one was named, either one for the two disciplines, and in there is the complete policy of basically how to get on to name the next England talent program for the next year. and within that we use a matrix structure and explain that there. So those policies are available online, and if you have any questions, the best thing to do is to speak to your son or daughter's coach initially, and they'll be able to talk through the policy with you there on that one.
That will go right up to the top level. It will go to sort of the podium. So sort of if, like my son, when you're sort of there, you're at that sort of podium level, they will have something like that. Not to the same sort of degree, but they will have something that they can refer to. So they know that they've got to achieve certain standards to achieve certain criteria. Money, if you like, you know.
It's based on funding.
Funding, yeah. So it is important that you know about it so that you can support your kids. Okay. This is about that support, and you need to continue that support all the way through. There are other things that, from sort of this as well, support to achieve food. You've got to get the right food, all right? You should get the support through talent, whether it be talent, GB, wherever you're going. They will give you through the nutritionists sort of what you should and what you shouldn't be eating. You know, if they're on McDonald's sort of five days out of 7, you know, that's not quite right. All right, so it gets to the point that sort of my son Richard was, you know, he had a freezer full of just meat. There wasn't an ounce of fat on it, but that's at that top level. But you do need to sort of for your own children, you know, even if you're not an athlete, so it comes from a wife who's a nurse, you know, that she'll be cooking good meals for us, so that sort of, you know, you should have good, healthy meals. But from a sort of canoeing point of view, from an athlete, you know, sort of they'll be trying to guide you sort of what you should be having, what's good, what's not, etc., etc. And again, sort of like nutritionists at all levels.
As more and more support becomes available as they move on up through.
One of the things, there was a sort of a question that came sort of through because somebody was not able to attend, and that was about what supplements did the boys?
We don't have any supplements.
And all our boys had was they were using just High Five. That's all it is, and that's it at the early days. And that was purely just to supplement sort of, you know, if they're off training, if they're sort of competing, 2 runs, etc. That was it. That's all they had. And in fact, sort of, you know, with the being knocked on the door for sort of doping, sort of, you know, at silly o'clock in the morning, you know, sort of, you know, they were just not silly in that respect. Richard just sort of hands up, not going anywhere near there. And in fact, he was quite critical of some sort of the athletes in other sports that suddenly became sort of, oh, that person has just been done for sort of, you know, inappropriate drugs. Well, you know, sort of, you will find as you move through, there will be set sort of days whereby you'll just have your children will just have a talk on sort of drugs, what they shouldn't be taking and what is in there. And there's a whole sort of list of them, what they should and shouldn't be taking. And I know every time somebody sort of, from Richard's point of view, says, yeah, we knew that was on that list, they shouldn't be taking it. They did. So it's, don't get hung up on the drug side of things. You know, it's more, I would say to you, is the sort of the food side of it and sort of the liquids.
Also, I would say from a mum, even at quite a high level, make sure you've got plenty of food on you, because Richard still, even when he lived away from home, would still come and say, "What you got to eat, Mum? What have you got?" So we always made sure we got things that he would want as well, and that he could dig into. So that was, yeah.
Right. For us, we started off, we run events, we've organised events, we've been part of the timing team, and was chair of Hounslow for sort of
10 years.
10 years, there you go. The sport needs help, all right? It cannot organise it for itself, especially at that high level. Yes, if a club is there trying to make money, hopefully it's going to have sort of people there from its own club, whether it be sort of judges, whether it be clerks, whether it be sort of people in the tea hut to make money, etc., etc. But if your event up here, you know, it's not necessarily put on by a club. It might be sort of the committee, the slalom committee. It does need help. So please think about sort of helping out. They're not going to make you do a section judge stint when your children are going down the course. You know, they don't do that. All right, but if you can help, and who knows, you know, if you get into that sort of helping out in timing, helping out section judges, there are expenses available. It shouldn't be the reason for you to do it, but it is there available for you. But yeah, the races won't happen without volunteers. That was here. That was 2009 for the Europeans, junior under 23s.
No. Was that the juniors or was that the seniors one? I can't remember now. Which was
Seniors.
Senior Europeans.
Senior Europeans.
Yeah.
This is what we like to see.
A glorious hot weekend. The following weekend, the course was closed because of flooding. We were so lucky. That's me with the award of merit, which was presented to me, which I was put forward by Richard Canoeing here for all the work I've done with that.
We did discuss it with the boys, and as far as we were concerned, it was, if you want to quit, not a problem, but you tell us. You tell us you want to quit and why you want to quit. And, you know, and when you say quit, you know, you just had to give us a plausible reason. It wasn't that, I can't be bothered anymore. But that was it. But there was never a time when the boys said, I want to quit. Our oldest son eventually did quit, retire.
He was about 26.
His progression through was a bit more sort of difficult, but he decided to. And eventually, sort of, he was the one who sort of met a young lady who worked here, got married, and I've got two grandchildren. So it's.
There are times when they do feel like quitting, and you get that sort of weather.
That was Lee Valley when sort of when it's like that, and I've had it up here. I've run an England weekend, and just sort of walking up and down the sort of the bank in the snow. But that just happened to be a Lee Valley.
And when they have quit, they're still their best supporter. That's out in VO.
Yeah. So he still supports them. Right. You all know about the first bullet point. Yeah, we'll all do it. And sort of, as far as I'm concerned, yes, we did it because I'd rather see my children sort of start off, progress in life. Richard went on a bit further than I was anticipating, but once he sort of got into it, there was an element that he was doing. But they still come back. Oh, can I stay overnight, Dad? Or could you just take me to somewhere? I think the other side of Birmingham. I didn't realise it was the other side of Birmingham. But yeah, they still looked for your support. Could I have done other things? Could I have changed it? Yes, I could. And I'll be quite honest and open it. I could have been more positive. I'll be honest.
In the early days.
In the early days, when you get psychologists sort of talking to you and saying, Andy, positive. So it is about us, you being that positive about what you're doing for them, right? Because as I said, they know if they've done something wrong, if they've had a bad run. It's about you being positive for them. Alice, my daughter, 10 years difference from Richard. She announced, I don't want to canoe.
She was 8.
But bearing in mind, it was slightly different. When we were looking at it, if she'd have actually followed the boys down with a 2-year gap, she might have been different. She probably did have, I can't remember when she last did it, has a good paddle style. But she said no, didn't want to do it. And didn't want to do it. We then went and sort of moved from London to Somerset. And she said, horse riding. Well, I'm not quite sure what was more expensive, canoeing or horse riding, especially when you buy a horse and then you have to feed it. If you buy a canoe, you haven't got to feed it. So, but no, she was, and she still sports. She was out in Rio with the boys. So we have no regrets about what we did in that support for Richard and of James. And I guess if you take it down, of saying to Alice, yeah, you went and did horse riding, great for you. Okay.
Sorry, can you expand on that just a little bit more? The age gap meant that Richard and James, did they still need one parent doing help for them while Alice?
No. Alice was dragged around right from a very early age.
About 4 weeks the first event she went to.
Yeah, but once she said horse riding.
Yeah.
No, but because it's at 10, so by the time she came in at about 8, we're in that 18 grade, so that they were able to do that, and that's why I said, if it had been a sort of a 2-year gap for all 3 of them, I think it might have been very different in what happened there.
Yeah, I mean, there were times we did leave her with friends when we wanted to go to events when there was one later on, or she could celebrate. So that's this one for. Thank you, Mum and Dad. That's going to Borg every summer holiday.
That game was down in Borg.
That's going to Borg. And this is Dad sitting. The first time we went to Borg, Richard swam, and they had to chase the boat an awful long way down the river to find it, and it was not very healthy when we found it.
Most evenings in the buildings there that sort of winter time are used like this, sort of the ski chalets. We were outside repairing boats that evening, ready for the next day's carnage.
They had got very nice new boats, and we had bought cheap old boats the first time we went there, so they didn't write off their race boats. Again, family and
that's about the support. So although she didn't want to sort of canoe, she was still back at London and she was at Rio. Right. The boys, there was commitment. The commitment that the boys put in is really, I would guess, is what it was all about. It was hard in the early days because of Richard was small. I'm not sure if you've seen that, in some of those pictures. He was small, so he had to rely on his technique. And we believe that technique that he had to learn, because there were older paddlers there that could get by on strength, has put him instead for where he is now. And I guess he's sort of dedicated the whole of his life to it. Still there now. So there is another one on the summing up that I'll get to. The right coach. There were times when Richard had a coach that he really just couldn't react to. It wasn't quite gelling. And then when he actually got somebody that he could react to, then there was things coming forward. A boat. Richard had a boat. Sorry, James had a boat. It was a higher volume than he should have had, which he actually took a backward step. And both of them, actually, we bought Mini Mystiques. Not sure if they're still around. I know Richard's Mini Mystique is still up at Feneley in Scotland, but it was a cut down. So if your kids are in high volume or higher volume than they need, that can be negative for them. All right. Hard work. Richard made lots of sacrifices. He can't go to parties anymore. If he went to a party, probably 2 pints and that's it. He'll be walking home because he's just not used to alcohol. So he made lots of sacrifices. Girls, sacrifices there because he put the priority into canoeing. British canoeing. And this is not about, I'm nothing to do with British canoeing. They have done a lot for the boys. They did a lot for the boys in just canoeing. They weren't singled out and were specially treated differently. But what British canoeing did, once they got that set up going, was positive for them.
That's what we like to see. That I think is one of my most favourite photos.
One of the things that has not been said, it was everything that as part of this has all been Richard Hounslow, silver medalist, London and Rio. A year after London, they became world champions, Dave and Rich. It's harder to be a world champion than it is to be an Olympic champion. In Olympics, one boat per nation. The world's 3 boats per nation. It's a lot harder. And that's why when they came in, when you're up there on the table, when Etienne and Tim were the figureheads after the Olympics, when the boys got their medal, they became top of the table. Which is quite nice.
Yeah, that's
and that was the world medal.
That was lots of things came of the Olympic medal, and that's when Richard got the Freedom of the City of London. You can take sheep across Tower Bridge, London Bridge, sorry.
Would we change anything? Yes, I guess, and I've said it, there were things I would do differently for the boys, and I hope the way the setup is now that you're learning at that earlier age in your children's paddling. Richard has got a paddler down now. He's into coaching. He's got a paddler that he's really trying to nurture in, and sort of it probably sort of hasn't had that positiveness in him, and he's trying to install that into that paddler now. So yes, you do need to do that and sort of start it off at an early age. More support and guidance. Early days, as I said, it wasn't available to them. That's supporting and for them, but it's now coming through. Never be negative, always be positive. So I guess the number one thing that you guys need to take away from here is that. Right.
And there he is coaching the talent group at Lee Valley.
So sort of right, and I don't make no apologies for sort of referring to these on this particular one. It is support wanted by the athletes. Don't be overbearing, right? Be positive at the events, all right? As I said, bad run, don't worry about it. Understand, and sort of, although I've got it here, sort of be bridge canoeing, the talent side of things, all right? These guys have been working with this for some time, and they do have a structure in place, all right? And you may find that sort of you don't agree with something, but talk that through with them. Understand why it's there in the program. Respect the volunteers. We need the volunteers. And thank an organiser. Thank an organiser. But hey, the number one sort of the message here. Support. Don't be negative. Be positive. All right, and support your. And I refer to them as your children. They are your children. All right, and understand what they want, not what you want them to do. Right? Don't live your life through them. Okay.
That was great. London 2012. Rio.
I hope you all get to experience something like this. Do remember that Olympics, there can only be one K1 man. There can only be K1 woman. Three in the world, and there's some of the other competitions, and the Olympics only comes along for every 4 years. But it's been nice to feel that that everything that these guys are doing within the talent through sort of the GB, you can experience, because it's a great feeling when you're there and you're watching your kids come down, and they're going to medal.
That was London.
I apologise because we did go over probably, but we may have probably answered a number of the questions that were going to be sort of asked within sort of the summing up. Do any of you have any questions whatsoever here?
Yeah, if anyone in the room would like to ask any questions to Anne and Andy in the next 5 minutes or so. Also, if anyone who's also on the webinar wants to ask a question, if you want to write that in the chat, and Andy and Anne will be happy to answer that there. So does anyone have any questions for them both? I've just had one question that was actually brought up from one of the parents who weren't able to access it today. So you talked about when you were driving the boys up and down the country and everything like that. Were there cases, obviously, when the boys perhaps didn't do very well? What sort of communications were you sort of having in the car with the boys, to help them sort of overcome their setbacks? Were there any communications in the car? What sort of things were sort of being said?
Yeah, I guess it's as Anne said, a lot of the times that sort of they crash out in the back of the car, and it was one of those things that sort of we had sort of people movers like Espace and sort of that type of vehicle, and they'd just be crashed out. But I guess again, it's there would have been times when we negatively spoke about it. So again, what I would say to sort of all of you and those that are listening, it is about that being. Don't refer to the positive. I guess it's what you're going to take out of this weekend's results, so that we can go forward and make it positive, and learn by it. Was there something you were doing wrong that you need now to sort of concentrate on? The concentrate, an example we had when when Richard and David Florence first got into a C2, they were in Augsburg, and they was right. They've got a course. Back offs. We've never practiced a back off. What are we going to do? So it was a case of, right, fortunately, this was before, you could see before the event. So it wasn't a case of, we were having to talk through with them, right, what we're going to do, how are you going to do this? And they were sort of further up the course, practicing back offs to do this competition, so that it's sort of to try and sort of prevent it being a disaster. So it was just sort of just a little light-hearted sort of little insertion in there. But do I see somebody's?
Yeah, we did have a question from the chat. So now that they're older, do your boys ever think they've missed out on any other aspects of life due to the commitment that they've had that needed to be for them to be training, etc.?
I don't think James would. I think Richard's. He's always put 110% into what he's done. And I think he's found it very hard to hold down a relationship because he's been away such a lot, or his commitment has been so high. I think that's probably the only thing that I would think that he would have liked to have happened, but hadn't, and still hasn't. But yeah, it is hard.
No, it's that longer term commitment. It's like he's out in Rio at the moment for 3 weeks. He thought when he sort of stopped being a paddler and you become a coach that sort of life would get normal. I don't know what he felt normal was, but suddenly, you're out in Rio for 3 weeks, or he's going to be down in Australia for a month and a bit, so they're still away. So you're going to have a relationship. Suddenly, he's still got people that young ladies around that are more than happy to be meeting up, as and when he's around. But a lasting friendship. Yes, there's a lasting friendship, but not to go into a commitment.
One final thing then, sort of following on from that sort of question. So what sort of long-term impact has the involvement in the sport had on your boys?
From Richard's point of view, what he has learnt going through. It's about his confidence. I would say he'd be a better person giving this presentation than probably I would. He's just used to those sort of things now. I looked up them was on Facebook. He was giving for the the ICF, International Crew Federation. He was giving little video snippets, presentations on reading the water, and he's putting these little sayings this, and that confidence is there, as opposed to it being it was just a straight flow. and that's something that sort of he has learned from that, and hopefully that will put him in instead. The fact that he is able to go, if he wanted to go in for a sort of a different job, you know, sort of the fact that you've actually made a commitment to the sport over the years to go to a company, and I think it was, personally, I don't know the name, I don't like to say, but Richard Branson. Sorry, I used to work for British Airways, and so then there's this thing with me and Virgin. But Richard Branson would take people out of a sort of structure, a sort of a GB structure, whatever the sport is, and say, I want those because they are committed. They were prepared to give, you know, sort of a commitment to his companies because of what they've done within the sport. So sort of those sort of things, you know, sort of that he's learned, and you know, it's, you know, he's more than happy, as was shown on there, about sort of when he was in between, when he elected to sort of hang his paddle up, and before he got a coaching role, he was actually coaching the talent. As far as he was concerned, you know, he was giving back to the sport.
He's travelled widely as well, and he's got friends all over the world, which I think again will stay good friends for a long, long time.
Yeah, question.
So following on from that, realistically, more of our children are going to be like your older son, James, and get to a certain level, not get glory and medals and things. Very few of our children are likely to end up with Olympic medals. So what would you say James has taken from, I mean, if he retired at 26, that's still a lot of commitment to elite sport. Do you think you need the glory, the medals, or are there transferable skills that, you know, 10 years in elite athletics?
Going forward, when and I would say when we were where you are now, Olympic medals, World Championship medals, never even on the horizon. Never even on the horizon. It was really where you are now. Yes, you've got to have sort of the goals as to where you are trying to sort of get to, and that I think is important because that's all part of life. And I think sort of as long as you can balance that up with your children as to sort of where they're going to go. If they're thinking now, right, you know, sort of, I'm going to be sort of the world champion or I'm going to get a medal, good, but I think you really have to set their expectation that they probably set their sights a little bit too far at the moment, so that when and if, for whatever reason, and there are various reasons, again, when we were asked to do this, you know, we were looking at sort of some of the paddlers, whether they dropped out because it was they went to university, they met a partner, they got a job, parents couldn't afford to support them, and there were people in that position, and unfortunate that when that sort of thing happens, that takes that decision for them to quit out of their control, and then it becomes a family discussion. But as far as sort of I was concerned, yes, I agree. There were going to be people dropping out, and I think it's really something that sort of you will need to sort of be sort of you'll see it on the horizon because they're not that committed. And you do have to commit to it. It's not to say James, when he stopped, he was rafting.
He went to rafting.
He rafted for GB. Went out to the Worlds in Ecuador. He has still rafted, cycling. So it's not as if he suddenly just sort of shut up shop as an athlete. It's just a bit slightly focused in different directions. And yeah, I guess there will always be people coming along, that younger ones that are coming along and start knocking your confidence because they're beating you, and suddenly it's like some of the positions that you're going to go into teams, dependent upon the age profile of the groups. Richard, there was probably only about one or two athletes in his age range. James, my oldest, there was a lot more. It was half a dozen plus. When you start getting the GB team, you're looking to and I use it, dead man shoes really, because you're waiting in the seams to actually get in, to get that third boat, and it's happened to Richard, you're in there, boom, next year you're out. Until you get into that team, on a regular basis, you could be out, and it depends how you approach it. I'm hoping that at what level that your son or daughter will be at, that they are talking to him about it. But yeah, I can name them, the paddlers that have dropped out because it didn't happen to them. I met one of them in Poe.
Yeah.
She didn't make it. I was on the finish line, boat weighing. A whole world had fallen apart because she didn't make the team. It came up. We had a little chat. She thanked me. Next time I saw her, she was living in France. Had struck up a relationship with a French paddler, which is out there.
But I think James still got a lot out of it. He didn't go into the workplace with any sport, of any sort of sport. He's an engineer and things, but he certainly did get a lot out of it over the years.
All of your siblings will learn something, and in life it will be there. What they're doing out there, that discipline. There will be discipline in the canoeing will rub off into what they're doing in life. So they will be learning. They will be getting. They will be getting stuff out. I'm just trying to look through the words. They will be getting something. It depends on how far they go down that structure. As to what they get out, whether it be eating the right food, whether it be being able to communicate, whether it's get on with other people through the paddling structure. Is that you okay with that?
So I just want to recap on thanking Andy and Anne for coming in today to talk to them about the role that they've had as a parent, and the journey that they've been on with their boys. So thanks a lot to Andy and Anne.